Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of the Age Group Triathlon podcast. In this week's episode I'm joined by Emma O'Toole, who is a strength and conditioning coach who specialises in endurance sport. Now Emma really is an expert in strength and conditioning, whereas for me it's another qualification that I have. But I wanted to get Emma on to talk about how it is that we fit strength training in around our day-to-day schedule. There's all sorts of information out there about the benefits of strength and conditioning, the kind of exercises you should be doing, all of this technical information. But what I really wanted to understand is how do you fit it in? How many hours of strength training a week should we realistically be doing? How is it going to affect our swimming, cycling, and running? How should we fit it in? So we have all sorts of little bit of tips, bits of insight, and we do go through a few strength training related rabbit holes as well, you'll be pleased to hear. So I really hope you enjoy this week's episode. I learned a lot, and I hope you do too. Hello Emma, welcome to the Age Group Triathlon podcast.
Hi Simon, thank you very much for having me.
That's all right. So Emma O'Toole is did I pronounce that correctly?
Yeah.
just
heard
always
worse.
want to make sure. Take that as a compliment. Like myself, she's a triathlon coach and a strength coach, whereas for me, kind of strength coaching is just, I qualified recently. It's just, it's another part of what I do. I think Emma's definitely leaned more into the strength and conditioning side of things, more experienced. It's a bit more of a focus in her business. So if you can just give us a little bit of insight into sort of your background, sort of as an athlete and as a coach, I think that would be a good place to start.
Yes, certainly. Thank you for the introduction, and certainly agree with you that triathlon coach and independent in the sports themselves, running, cycling, swimming, but main focus is along the strength training side of things. And my background, gosh, I've been in sports for as long as I can remember, but very varied sports as a childhood. From football, basketball, hockey, all of them. I think anything to get me out of school or on the minibus so you didn't have to catch the last class of the day. And then when I was 16, I really sort of thought, oh, actually, I really just enjoy the headspace. It was mainly came from the mindset side of things, of like, right, it really makes me feel good, sets up my day, and lent massively into running at that time. That was running and cycling. In cycling was more indoors, but then running was obviously outdoors more so than indoors. So I wasn't stuck on treadmill for hours on end, and did the normal progression with it all. I think really 5k, 10k, half, marathon, or at quite a relatively young age. And then the same with triathlon, sprint, Olympic, 70.3 and beyond, and got to be an age grouper as very
Great.
on point for the triathlon for this podcast. And and it just really grew from there. And unfortunately, so from my background, I say probably of the three disciplines, cycling was always my strongest discipline. And that's the one where I'd spent most of my time from a young age. And I suppose most of my sort of training and coaching, my coaching had been around cycling, and that was completely across indoor, the velodrome, which I really recommend for handling skills and beyond, is a great training tool there. And then I unfortunately would just regularly get injured. So I dealt with sort of overuse injuries, stress fractures, impact injuries from crashes. And at the time, my coaches were sort of like, well, let's look at the training. And obviously, there's so many factors that can play into this, from nutrition, obviously the training itself, and making sure that it's not too aggressive and you're giving yourself recovery days or adaptation days, as I quite like to call them sometimes. And there's lots of factors into it, but actually what used to be sort of known as the female athlete triad, which is now RED-S, or low energy availability, going into RED-S, obviously more easily recognizable in females because of the loss of menstruation, but very potent in males as well. And yet that was something I suffered from, and it was never really discussed beyond that point. And then obviously as I was growing up, as I was pursuing my career, it was, where do I want to put my focus? Okay, doing what I love and helping support the people that my friends down at the track or the velodrome, wherever. And it was seeing that, hold on a minute, it's not just me that's dealing with these sort of repetitive injuries, and you build your season up and then you just come crashing back down, and you sort of, it's that, then the mental wave of it is really high, low, high, low. So it was looking at, okay, where's that difference? What can we change? What element is missing from my training? And it was sort of around, I guess, just pre the Olympic boom. And then for me, off my own back, strength training started to get more publicized by those at the top of the sport. So I remember I often reference it actually, but like Mo Farah, you can access it on YouTube, did a really good, actually, strength, even to this day, great strength routine. And obviously, you know, renowned long distance runner. And it was sort of like, oh, okay, hold on a minute. Why, now that I've got my nutrition on point, my training plans on point, am I still getting these overuse injuries, or something's not quite lining up here? And that, to me, then the answer was through strength training. And it was having that from the movement screenings and looking at, wow, there's a lot of imbalances there, probably from the years of overcompensation. And there's a lot of asymmetry there, which, you know, we don't have to have perfect symmetry, but obviously this bigger asymmetry is going to have a knock-on effect later on. And it was sort of thinking, I want that change, and I don't just want that change for myself. I want that change for everyone who loves to do endurance sports, everyone who loves to do triathlon and the sports independently. And that's sort of where Built to Endure was founded and grew out of, really, both the education side and the one-to-one coaching side.
Excellent. So I think most of us are aware, we've read enough articles. As you say, you know, I mean, when I first started in sport around 2012, strength training was something that, you know, was kind of, you read about and you heard about, but now it's become much more to the forefront. And it's probably more unusual for somebody not to do strength training than it is for someone to do strength training. Well, so I
you see my face
there. Yeah. Okay, at least in the circles that I move in, I guess at least, you know, the athletes that I work with, they don't really give up much resistance to it when I say we're going to do a couple of gym sessions a week. Most of them are pretty happy with that. And, you know, I think, you know, the drum about why we should do strength training has been beaten quite a bit. And what I wanted to look at today was, if somebody decides, okay, I want to do strength training, or I need to do strength training, is how they fit it in alongside triathlon training. Because swimming, cycling, and running is a lot to fit into a calendar in 1 week. Even if you're only doing 2 sessions of sport a week. And then if somebody says, oh, and you need to really look after your nutrition, right? Okay, well, that can add on sort of extra time in a day, and you need to strength train. You can understand some people going, well, yeah, but I don't enjoy the gym. I don't enjoy the strength training. I'm not seeing immediate benefits out of it. I'd rather go out for another run. Now, as coaches, we've seen enough stories of people getting injured and falling out of the sport because they've neglected this, to know that's probably not sort of a long-lasting strategy. But if somebody goes, right, you know, how, you know, I do want to do strength training, I see the value in it, how do they find time to fit it into all of the rest of their training?
I think most importantly is to recognize where the athlete's starting point with it is. And I think often people think strength training, and the first thing that comes at the forefront of the mind is big heavy weights, a massive barbell loaded up. And actually, it really doesn't have to be the case. And that may be something that, yes, is suitable for that individual athlete at some point in their training career. But what we often see as coaches is that an athlete's training age is in endurance sports, so their experience with endurance sports is really high, but their training age with strength training is actually really low, and they're pretty much beginners, without being disrespectful to anyone. But if you've done 3 years of 3 months in the gym in the off season, which is typical for most triathletes, you've actually only cumulatively have 1 year's worth of strength training, and that's broken up obviously into different periods. So yes, it's been over a 3-year period, but you've only got 12 months of it. So there's a massive sticking point here that actually the barbell, the heavy weights, which everyone seems to love to and gravitate towards, or that instant flash that comes to the mind, that can come later on. And there's so many benefits from a home gym setup with a couple of dumbbells and a couple of kettlebells and some bands thrown in there, which then you take out the need for the commute to the gym. You take out the need to have this plethora of equipment there and resistance machines and loads of different weight choices. And most of it, especially initially, if somebody is starting their journey with strength training, is looking at how do you move? Where are your imbalances? Can you hinge? Can you squat? Okay, let's now work on these, let's build these. And there's so many variables that we can manipulate, even in the home setting, as in tempo, ranges of motion, and these can be manipulated all throughout the season, closer to your races. But yeah, it's really removing that barrier that you don't need access. It doesn't need to be a gym, and it doesn't need to be, I mean, heavy is, it's relative strength, isn't it? So it's going to be very subjective to everyone based off of their body weight. So there's that element of the word heavy itself, but you don't necessarily need to have that from the starting point. You can build and you can progress to that. And actually, most of probably the athletes that I work with do only have home equipment, and they might get a few more bits as they go along. So they might get a heavier kettlebell, but it can be something as simple as working on a goblet squat, and you've gone from using one dumbbell and now you're going to rack two together. Well, suddenly you've doubled the weight if the dumbbells are the same weight, and it's just it's clever and smart with it. But then having somebody there supposed to guide you and be like, right, let's do this. That's change motion. That's spend longer in the eccentric phase, so you've got more time under tension. So we're going to be eliciting different stimulus from this to build the quality, and this is the quality we're looking to build. So it's I think a big thing is about keeping it simple. And I think this is where, you jump online, you go onto Instagram or TikTok, which I'm not overly familiar with, but Instagram I am more familiar with. And there's different exercises, there's different routines, and it can be very much like you're in a sweet shop and you're like, oh, which one do I want to pick today? Where actually the power is in the simplicity and the consistency. Get the movements right, keep it simple. And I know that's not sexy, and I know that's not what gets you viral views online, but unfortunately that is the truth, and that's where the magic happens.
A lot of triathletes who are resistant to strength and conditioning, it may be because they got a membership at a pool or at a leisure centre where they have access to a gym. And what they do is they say, okay, I've read all about strength and conditioning, I'm going to do some gym work. They go up to the gym and they are anxious, they're nervous, they're out of their comfort zone, and they're not really sure what to do. And they kind of, I'm talking about myself here as much as anything else. They do a couple of laps around the gym looking at the bits of the equipment, and they're not really sure what that does. All that bit over there that's full of like really strong looking men, I don't belong over there.
And they're grunting.
And yeah, yeah. I haven't come here to go on the treadmill or on the exercise bike. I've come here to get strong. So what is it most people gravitate towards that's simple and easy to use? They go, oh, I'll use the weight machines.
Yeah.
And they often go, well, I'm a triathlete, so I'm going to do legs. So they do some reps on the leg extension machine. And then they might do something for the hamstrings, perhaps as well. And they go, oh well, I'll do a little bit of a bit of chest for the swimming as well. And they do these and start to feel a bit self-conscious, and they pack it in, and they go, oh, I don't know what I'm doing. They go home, they wake up the next day, and they can barely walk because because they've gone sort of too hard too soon. Their
much
body
volume.
wasn't ready for it, and they probably used more weight than they should have done on the machine because they were trying to show off or make it look like they knew what they were doing.
Yeah.
And they've had this really negative experience. But you don't need, like, it's very rare that I will suggest that an athlete uses a weight machine. For a number of reasons. One, because you require a gym to have access to one. Also, because not many of them really involve compound movements. They're more
Very
designed
good for
either,
isolation.
yeah, isolation exercises, which is fine if you're a complete beginner to fitness or if you're a bodybuilder that really wants to focus down on like that one specific muscle. But if you're a triathlete, you don't need treadmills, you don't really need exercise bikes, you don't need weight machines. you don't necessarily need to have a huge barbell and squat rack. So are you paying your gym membership fee to have access to a few kettlebells and dumbbells? And yeah, and that you don't need, obviously there's a huge amount that you can do without that gym membership. And you don't then have the commute to the gym as well.
Yeah, I mean, even for myself as a strength coach, I typically do one session at the local gym on a Tuesday, and my second session on a Friday is done at home because I've got enough equipment to be able to do what I want to do with it, and it's easy. I haven't got to go anywhere. I haven't got to travel to it, and I can do my run. And we do the run in the morning, and then the strength session either at lunchtime or later on in the evening. And you're right, you're entirely right that it hasn't got to be a gym environment. And I think coming back to that, you walk in and there's this abundance of equipment and you think, oh, like cable machines, how do I even set those up? What height does it need to be?
Yeah.
And all of these questions then start coming into your head. And it's quite intimidating to think.
Hugely, yeah.
And then there's the element of decision fatigue, which is something I talk about quite a lot, even just in terms of the endurance training. And that's why coaching is so beneficial because, and I think for us, why our coaching works is that the application I use for people's strength training, they just hit start and they follow it. And there's a reference there of a video if they need to just check in of what they're doing, but they haven't got to think about which exercise do I do? Should I be doing this before this? You don't particularly want to be reserving box jumps if that's what you're doing for your plyometric based exercise at the end of your session when you're really fatigued, because you're going to carry a hell of a risk of potentially tripping over and then not being able to run for a few days. And I think a massive shift in mindset as well, coming away from your strength sessions are not meant to feel like a run or a ride or a swim set. It's supposed to be a different stimulus to your body. So we want you walking down the stairs later that day and the next day because it's your endurance enabler. It's going to help you run, ride, swim better rather than that's the focus. And we're not lifting for egos, you're lifting for performance and longevity in the sport.
Yes. And that what you're saying about how it shouldn't dominate what it is that you do. Like if I am doing a big maximum strength block and I am doing a big squat with a loaded up barbell, I can probably go for a run the next day without it really affecting me a huge amount because of that training age. Okay, yes, if I miss sort of a couple of weeks in the gym for whatever reason, then maybe it would take me a while to build up to that. But it shouldn't be seen as being this kind of work that should wipe you out and stop you from swimming, cycling, and running for sort of 2, 3, maybe 4 days afterwards. It should. You should never. Well, very rarely, really, should athletes leave the gym feeling absolutely shot. They should feel that they definitely worked, but they don't need to do a 90-minute set and kind of walk out of there like John Wayne. So
30 to 45 minutes is plenty. I'd normally say to somebody who has in access to a gym to make it around the 45-minute up to the hour mark because they've made the time investment to get there. So let's plan it strategically with your endurance training, with your triathlon training, making sure that you're still primed up for your key sessions that week. So we're being smart and savvy with it, but actually let's not sort of take the mick. You don't want to drive 15 minutes to then train for half an hour on a few exercise machines or dumbbells, barbells, whatever exercises, and then drive 15 minutes home. That's nobody's going to get enjoyment from that. And I think, just remembering why you're doing the strength. I'm a triathlete, I'm a runner, I'm a cyclist, I'm an endurance specialist, and the strength training supports it all. It's not the key, although I'm a strength coach and that's sort of the livelihood of my business. I'm a triathlete, I'm an endurance specialist. That's the top. I want to be able to run that marathon in this time for me for the performance goal, not I want to go into the gym and do a 1.2 times body weight squat. Not interested, don't care. And that's coming from a strength coach. But I think, and that's the difference, isn't it, in my opinion, sort of going to the gym and getting a personal trainer who may be really governed by the weight or the bar, or sort of a fitfluencer, as I call them online, and they're sort of like, lift really heavy, and they've got no idea what then it feels like to go and do a long run of 18 miles the next day or 2 days down the line, because they don't know what that feels like. And I don't know about yourself, but I'm very much take a subjective and an objective measuring tool into the strength sessions, as I do with the endurance triathlon sessions as well. But most of the sessions I prescribe to people are just done off of RPE or reps in reserve, because how you're feeling 6 weeks out from your Ironman race and what your capability of being able to lift is going to be completely different to how you're feeling at this time of the year when you're potentially 6 months out from the race or 5.5 months out from the race.
Yes.
And having that confidence to be, okay, not governed by the weight of the bar, for me is really important.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever set a weight session based on kilograms.
No, me neither.
I think it's always been on how the athlete feels on that day. Because if I were to take, it probably wouldn't be unreasonable of me in the off season to say to somebody, especially somebody who's relatively new to triathlon, say try to add 2.5 kilos to your squat each week and see how that feels. And so we set the target on the first week is 20 kilos, then 22.5, and you can add it up like that. But if somebody wakes up one day and they've not recovered maybe as well as they expected, and but they go, no, I'm going to follow this plan, I'm going to drag myself to the gym, and their session says, today you are doing 3 sets of 12 reps of 45 kilos, and they can barely do 30, how does that make them feel? Does that
it just
get them?
ruins that relationship.
Yeah, that relationship with strength training is really damaged. And yeah, some days I'll do a set of squats and I'll do sort of 1.5 times my body weight for 3 reps, and I feel really good. And it'll be like, that is like I really feel strong. Like that makes me feel really good. Other times I go in there and I'll just feel like I've got really empty legs. Like that I can't do anything. So RPE, as you say, in fact, if you just explain reps in reserve for the listeners who might not be aware.
So reps in reserve is a different measuring tool that you can use in your strength sessions, and it closely links to RPE, but it's sort of a different way of thinking about it. So say you had 3 reps in reserve, that would mean that you're using a weight where you felt that I could do 3 more repetitions with this weight whilst upholding technique. If you're working to a certain tempo, upholding that tempo. So it's just a different way of thinking about it, because I do find that for a lot of triathletes, RPE, and you put, we're going to hit a 7 out of 10 RPE today on this exercise.
Yeah.
They then channel that to the whole session feeling like a 7 out of 10. Don't want to take the rest periods after you finished your set.
Oh yes.
And then it's suddenly, but you said it was a 7 out of 10, and it's a 7 out of 10 in that moment, or in that 45 seconds that you're performing those 6 repetitions or 8 repetitions. So it's sort of that shift. Whereas if you go, I want you to use a weight that you feel like you could do another 3 reps with good technique to the tempo that we're after, range of motion, whatever those sort of circumstances that you put in there. And then it's suddenly like, okay, yeah. And they can ask themselves that, and you can then adjust, can't you? If you've got 4 sets of 6, you might go for the first set and be like, actually, I feel quite good today. I think I could have done 5 reps in reserve with that weight, or 5 more reps. So I'm going to add a little bit more, 1.25 each end if it's a bar, or as you said, we're not looking for big numbers and big jumps there. But I think, and that's sort of the power of a warm-up set. A warm-up set can be a nice way to check in. It's a bit like when we program warm-ups before you're going to go and do a run or a ride, and if you do your warm-up and you're like, God, my hip flexor feels really tight today, or my calf feels really tight today, you might drop a message to your coach if you haven't got time for that, obviously depending on that sort of coach-athlete relationship and structure that's set up. But you might be like, I'm not going to do the interval session of 12 times 400 meter reps today, because actually I felt a bit of a niggle in my hip flexor. And then you just put a little message in Training Peaks later on in the day. And it's the same thing with what you were saying about the athlete program for 4 sets of 12 or 3 sets of 12 squats at 45 kg, and they're struggling with 30. They're not going to hopefully grind through 45 kilograms with 12 reps for 45 kilograms. They'd put a note on Training Peaks or whatever platform you're using and just be like, reduced it down today. And that's what it's about, because again, it's respecting that we want you to either later that day, which is typical for most triathletes because of the high volume that's involved in triathlon, especially when you're pushing up to things like Ironman. We want you to be able to do your training for that, because that's you can run, you can do an Ironman. So I say to people, like, you can run a marathon, you can complete an Ironman, you complete a 70.3 without strength training.
Yes.
Because there's thousands of examples of people who do that. However, if you want to get out of it what you want to get out of it, you want to keep those sort of lingering niggles at bay. You want to potentially get performance time, and thinking, what sort of triathlete do I want to be in 5-10 years time, rather than seeing a really short-term thinking with it. And it's sort of like, okay, I could keep skipping this strength session and going for a 45-minute run instead, zone 2 easy, but actually which one's going to pay off more in the short term and the long term? And it will likely be that the strength session will, especially, I'm rambling here, but especially when we consider that, I think the profile for most age groupers, if you look sort of on British Triathlon, is 30 and above. You know, you sort of get quite popular in the 30 to 35 brackets, and then it sort of maybe dips around the 60. Would you agree with that from your experience on the...
I think a lot of people, once they hit 60, that's when sort of sarcopenia, which is sort of the muscle loss of muscle mass that comes with age, comes along. That's when people tend to fall off. But I guess you could ask yourself, hang on, if these people are feeling that they're being retired from the sport, if they had a little bit more of a focus on strength training to offset the effects of that sarcopenia and to improve their mobility, would they be able to keep racing for longer?
Yeah,
You know,
because interest... Oh no, sorry, you go.
No, well, I say if they are, okay, if somebody does get to 60 and they're just feeling tired and burnt out and they've lost the kind of the love for the sport, I'm not saying they shouldn't feel that they could retire, that we need to, strong arm them into the gym to keep racing. But I think a lot of triathletes, if they're racing into their 50s, it's a part of their identity, and that strength training can really extend your career as an athlete.
Yeah, I agree. And touching on the sarcopenia, it's typically actually from our 30s that we start to begin that natural process of muscle loss. And then that is normally, people think around 60, because you're losing every decade. I think it's off the top of my head, 5 to 10%. And was it 2 to 5%? I have to double check the figures. I was writing it earlier and I've got numbers all over my head. But basically, it's that cumulative effect. If you're losing, say, 15% by the time you're 55, then that's going to add up, isn't it, over time? And that's not only going to affect your power output on the bike or on the run, but also just, your tissue capacity, the way you stand, your recovery outside of training, the way you sit. What are those? If we take our training, even a high volume age group athlete, 15-20 hours a week, which is, I'd say, high volume, typical for an Ironman, but it's still a lot. If you're doing, you're working 35-40 hours a week, and then you're training for 20, and you've got other commitments, it's a lot to balance. But that 20 hours is still, in the whole grand scheme of things, of your week, I think 1 hour is 0.6%, and I'm not going to embarrass myself with my math skills, but you'll be able to see that 20 hours it's not even a day, is it, of your whole week, the cumulative hours in there. So it's sort of thinking, okay, what am I doing in all of the rest of my time, and what's going to keep me in the sport for longer?
I think, and again, you could, oh, well, you're a pair of strength coaches, you would say that. Yes, I know. But I think that strength training genuinely can be, for return on investment, the best time that you can spend training within a week. If you are just doing, say, like 2 30-minute workouts, strength workouts, that's an hour, which could be one swim, one short bike, one easy run. If you're doing a strength session instead, and say somebody is trying to take they want to take 10 seconds off their 5K time because they are 25 minutes and 10 seconds and they really want to get underneath that 25 mark. If they go to the gym, if they are doing calf raises, if they are doing plyometrics, so anything that involves sort of jumping or explosive movements, that strength work on its own is going to have so much more benefit than just going out for yet another zone 2 run. And I know the zone 2 run, you will think, yes, I need to get better at running, I need to do more running. But I do think that if people are able to able to make the time for strength training, that it can be the best return on investment that you do a week.
Yeah, and I think your language there in the sense of making the time for it, because even those really time crunched athletes with a very high triathlon training volume, they arguably still will have the time in their week to do it. And I'm sure just a quick little check on your phone screen time may indicate that for the general listener. So it very much does come down to priorities, mindset. And unfortunately, I think a lot of triathletes either come to me, my experience is that they've had repetitive injuries over the years, either impact or overuse. Normally it's overuse injuries, and they're sort of like, I'm tired of this now. And for me, that's really sad. They've got to that stage of being like, I don't think, look at the typical cyclist, the lycra clad 40, 50-year-old male. I used to be a runner, but I can't run anymore because of my knees. There's no reason, there's studies out there showing that running is not bad for your knees. And yes, the injury may manifest in one site, but actually that's going to be caused by, it's multifactorial. There's lots of things going on there. And to me, I find it upsetting, because I'm like, oh, you've had to stop doing something you love. And, this isn't to come on. And obviously, yes, you and I have got a bias as strength coaches, but strength coaching is never going to guarantee that you'll never be injury free. If your training plan's completely off whack, if your nutrition's off whack, you're not sleeping enough, you're not hitting those pillars of athleticism, you're going to get injured. 9 times out of 10, you're going to get injured. Strength training's not just this little magic suit that you can zip up 2 sessions a week for half an hour each session, and I'm going to be fine, when suddenly you look on Strava at your training data and it's really low and then super high, and there's all these different spikes everywhere in intensity, volume. But actually, it really can cumulatively over time make a huge difference and keep you doing the sports for longer and enjoying them. And then in that comes, I work with so many athletes now that they're like, well, I'm hitting better PBs than I did in my 40s, 50s than I did in my 20s. Okay, there's going to be lots of things going on here, but arguably you're being consistent, and you're now challenging your body with a different stimulus. As you said, you're not just going out and running 50k a week, but you're trading, you're having the confidence in your training, you're having that trust in your coach with me, or your endurance, because sometimes I work with athletes who've got their own triathlon coach or endurance coach, and then I come on as their strength coach, and then we have that talk and we have that communication between us to be like, right, well, what's sort of the dead wood in this training week? Which is the thing, if you were to, you got really caught at work and you were like, oh, commute's been awful, what's the session that would go? Okay, it's that 40-minute steady zone 2 run, or 40-minute steady zone 2 bike, and then okay, that's the one we put in the strength session.
No, I think it is, and it could, I'm sure that we'll have triggered a few listeners just then with the suggestion that we might want to sort of to do less aerobic training for the sense of strength training. But I imagine there are like, the listeners who will be triggered will probably be those who've never had an injury. And you go, oh, but I need to think about my performance. Whereas those who have been injured and have had that horrible experience of being unable to train and unable to do the things that they want, probably can look at that and go, yeah, I mean, if I had done that, would I have got that injury?
Yeah.
And of course nobody can say, nobody's got a magic ball, crystal ball even. Nobody can sort of say that with certainty, but it's almost like a kind of insurance. Insurance doesn't always pay out, but it's a lot better to have it, to hopefully get you out of some scrapes, if the worst does happen. And I think that it's like the harsh truth is, if you ride your bike for long enough, you're going to crash it.
Yeah.
If you run for long enough, you're going to get injured at some point. It would be very foolhardy of anyone, any physio, strength coach, fitfluencer, whoever it is, to say if you do this, you'll never get injured. But it is the best sort of the best defense that we have. But going back to what you said, that you as a strength coach, you do two strength sessions a week. How long are those strength sessions respectively? The gym session and the home session?
So it will depend on where I am in the season. And I think this is another sort of important point for your listeners, is that just as your triathlon training evolves over the season relative to your race, so should your strength session. So if you're, 3 weeks out from your race doing what you were doing back in October, if you flip the coin and then said, okay, well, I want you now to do the same training that you're doing on the triathlon side of things on your swim, bike, run from October, and do that again in June, and your race is in July, what would you expect? Where would you see your progress to be? And so I think that's something worth pointing out, is just that just as your triathlon sessions adapt and progress, so too should your strength sessions. And we don't just want to keep it stagnant because we're chasing different adaptations throughout the season, just as you are doing with your triathlon training. And typically, I might throw a third one in the off season, so I might do 3 sessions a week, but they're no longer than an hour, even in the off season. It's normally I like the 45-minute mark, and that's to ensure I've got adequate rest in there, because again, going back to the sort of adaptation you're chasing, you're going to want to make sure you've got that rest in there. And that's being honest with yourself. If you're saying you're lifting at a 8 out of 10 RPE for 4 reps, or you've got 2 reps in reserve, and then you're like, bam, I could do that straight away again. Well, that's not true. That wasn't a true 2 reps in reserve lift. Just as if I said to you, go out and do 2-minute VO2 max intervals on the bike, and then you were like, okay, but I'm not going to give you any power information, I just want you to do it. And then you finish those and you're like, 20 seconds, I could go again. That's not a true VO2 max effort at that intensity that we're trying to chase. So yeah, typically long-winded way, but roughly around the 45-minute mark. But a couple of weeks out from a race, that would probably drop down to the 30-minute mark, and then I would lean more into just the home base, because I don't want to drive 20 minutes, 15 minutes to do 30 minutes of work and then drive the same way back again, because it just seems a waste of time.
Yep, no, I agree. So we're talking about, all being said, when all said and done, 90 minutes a week for strength training should be sufficient for most people. Now that probably works out at being sort of, roughly off the top of my head, about 12 minutes a day. Now, obviously, I can completely empathise if somebody has a very busy job, and they have a young family, and they have all of these balls they're juggling their life, and they're doing their swimming, cycling, and running training. If they turn around and go, I simply can't find 45 minutes in my day to even stop and do some home workouts. What I sort of talk about is the idea of, these little micro workouts you can do, such as doing a couple of calf raises every time you go up the stairs, balancing on one leg when you're brushing your teeth, maybe doing some stretches when you're watching television. If somebody has some really tight hips, just try, if you are sat watching the television, just sit in sort of a cross-legged position and try to relax into that as you're watching the TV, and see if you start to get some. It's just sort of simple things like that you can fit into your day. You don't need to ring fence this time always and go, oh, I'm going into workout mode here. It's surprising how much you can fit in throughout the day with, just body weight exercises on their own.
Yeah, micro movements. And if you are, typically training 6 days a week, then if you make sure you've got a really solid dynamic warm up in there, that can be a really effective way as well. Going into a deep squat position, working laterally, side lunges, high knees, to targeting the hip flexors, whatever it is. But if you make sure that you've got a really solid dynamic warm up, that can be a really nice way of getting that repeated micro exposure throughout the week to help support if you can't dedicate 45 minutes. But then again, I work with quite a lot of shift workers, which is definitely hard from a programming point of view, as I'm sure you fully would support with that one. But it's sort of thinking again with the programming, as in what, is there any deadwood that we could cut out? Or if they're adamant, as some are, that no, I'm not prepared to cut any of my endurance sessions for the sake of a strength session, then it's like, okay, what can we do? Can we work 20-minute sessions? Can they fit into your break at work, or while you're waiting to pick up your daughter from after school club, can you go and do something with body weight, or if you've got something laying around, a band or a kettlebell that you can just quickly use. And it's just really, I would say that the most bang for the buck there would be to focus on the posterior chains, like your hamstrings, your glutes, the calf raises definitely, but those areas where you are, or most endurance athletes, most triathletes do suffer, which is in those areas.
Yep. And you talk about sort of workouts becoming a bit sort of progressing throughout the year, how your workouts as you get closer to a race can look different to those in the off season. How would you progress or develop those workouts to make them more sort of race specific as we get closer to race day? What kind of exercises would you change?
This is definitely a minefield, isn't it, for even in just the coaching world, in the whole concept of periodization. And so if we sort of start a reverse engineering approach, I would be looking a couple of weeks out from your race for us to go, I call them race sharpening sessions. And sometimes people look at them and be like, hold on a minute, you still want me lifting at an 2 reps in reserve or an 8 out of 10 for that exercise? And I'm like, yeah, because what we're doing is the volume of your sessions are now really short, and but we're still keeping that intensity. So we're sharpening you for that race so that your neuromuscular system connection is firing there for you. And so it's just, so race sharpening sessions typically would maintain the intensity, maybe drop it a little bit, and cut out some accessory work if it's not necessarily needed, but really reduction to volume and keeping or maintaining the intensity there. And I'm quite maybe not cautious is the word to use. Well, I suppose cautious could be the word to use, but if we, plyometrics, I think, are this massively thrown around word, and there's obviously lots of different types of plyometrics, and without, a lot of the time athletes just need to focus on landing mechanics. So can you step off of the box and land? How are you landing? Are your knees kind of collapsing inwards? Are you landing in control? Are you wobbling all over the place before you even look at doing a box jump? So it's sort of like we've taken that box jump and that's suddenly at the top, and we've gone from bottom to top without the steps to get there along the way. So it's about, making sure there's nothing new in those sessions a couple of weeks out before your key races, because we don't want to suddenly be throwing a load of new movements at or exercises at your body. And the risk reward. So coming back to plyometrics box jumps, I wouldn't necessarily be having an athlete do really high box jumps, because if they it can happen to anyone, even if you're really experienced, well adept with it, I'd be like, okay, it's just that risk reward. If you just get your attention caught for 1 second and you trip, that could be it. Your whole race, your season that you've built that towards up, gone, because I've programmed you in a box jump, which at this point we can get a similar sort of stimulus for a lot less risk. And normally as well, a couple of weeks out from racing, we'll be looking at controlling the range of motion. So I don't really want long time and attention. So things like a squat would be a partial squat, and just looking at the forces we're using there. So it's just really about sharpening, rather than, I know you go online and you see some coaches would recommend really high volume and no intensity, and it's sort of like the volume's already high just from the triathlon side of things. We don't, we're very well adept to body weight work at this point, and have been from our season. We want the thing that's going to carry the most return on your time investment, which is, keep the volume low, keep the intensity high, and don't be silly. Don't expose yourself to something which could ruin your race.
What about as we move through the season, sort of single leg lifts versus bilateral lifts? What's your take on that?
So I have both. I typically have both bilateral, so both leg and also single leg movements throughout the season. There may be times where one of them's a little bit more biased, but it's so dependent on the athlete. I think obviously bilaterally you can hide a lot you can hide a lot, in the sense of, if you're performing a squat and you've got a weakness on your left side compared to your right could overcompensate, and then the squat you could lift a certain amount of weight or to a certain intensity. But then actually, if you were to break that down with a video analysis, you might see that, oh, my left hip is shifting because it can't support that weight there. But it's just not as obvious. If you then suddenly did a single leg squat and you were like, oh, my left leg, I can't go anywhere near the depth of my right leg, then you know it's a lot more obvious. So, yeah, I mean, definitely bilateral and single leg work is there throughout the season for me. What about for yourself? Is that something you...
Yeah, I mean, I would generally, I mean, if I have a discussion with an athlete and we decide that we are going to do a max strength phase, so we have enough time to spend, I normally do about sort of 6 to 8 weeks of, high reps, low weight, just sort of making sure that we've got, we've got the neuromuscular system firing as it needs to be. And then we'll do sort of and the skills, yes, and just feeling confident with the movement. And then I always check in before we start it with an athlete and go, look, are you happy if we do this max strength work? Because they have to be on board with it. And then I'll normally start, normally sticking with bilateral movements for the most part. And then we'll go, okay, let's do 5 reps of a squat, and we'll do that for a couple of weeks, with the idea being, if you feel you can, add just a little bit on to the bar between sets. If you're feeling confident, really explore with it. Don't just stick 100 kilograms on the back of a squat, on the back of a barbell, and go, oh, we're doing max strength, but to just play around with it, listen to their body, and just like, it doesn't have to be something that's super like trashing them. I always want them to have at least 1, ideally 2 reps in reserve, even when doing this work, because I don't want any of my triathletes ever going to failure in the gym. I think, as you say, the risk reward, it's just not worth it, Um, and then normally I normally will stick to bilateral movements with most athletes in the max strength block. If I've been with them for a few years, we might start doing some more max strength with the unilateral lifts, single leg movements. If we think that's going to be of benefit. But if it's somebody's first Ironman they're training for and they're not really that confident in the gym anyway, I'll probably just stick to the bilateral exercise. Maybe a lunge. As well, but there's, again, you've got more stability with a lunge than you would with sort of a single leg Romanian deadlift, as it was as an example anyway. And then once we get out of that max strength phase, generally I will, like most weeks, I'll normally keep one high load, low rep exercise in the program. I don't abandon lifting heavy completely, but it is just left in there just to make sure that you're topping that up. And the focus is instead on sort of power exercises, unilateral exercises, mobility. It becomes a bit less focused on the actual like muscular sort of strength development, and it's much more on, okay, we've built all this great strength with our bilateral movements. Now let's actually learn how to apply that to our racing. And that's my philosophy, at least.
Yeah, no, I agree, definitely. And I think if we take sort of even just, what is power, then obviously you're going to be capped by your strength. So you need that foundation there. But then I suppose the variables that I manipulate as we come more into a power block, sort of closer approaching races, would be, again, we're not throwing out the other accessory work. So I'm not throwing out some sort of low load, high volume work relative. Obviously, I'm maybe talking like 3x10 or something like that, and some, isometric work in there as well. But it's then that focus of, I'm now more interested in, I'm saying, the intensity is still there, but the intensity doesn't always just have to be weight on the bar. That could be the speed you're moving the bar or the kettlebell or whatever you're using. And I think, so going back to the aforementioned point on the race sharpening sessions, it might be actually that you are using a lighter weight, but now rather than doing a 3-second lowering and a 1 second, explosive up, we might, or a 3 1-second pause and then up. I'm just really focusing on how quickly you move that bar back up, or how quickly you return to a standing position with control. How can you express that power? And tempo is a really nice way of playing around with that.
Yep. Just a little bit of point of clarification here. For a lot of athletes who, when they hear us talking about power, probably start thinking about FTP and bike power, and we probably slipped into strength training lingo a little too easily there. If you could just explain to the listeners what power means within the strength training context, Emma.
So power is a stage periodization in the sense or programming that you'll go through an adaptation that you're seeking. And there's, as I said, there's lots of different models out there. So the linear one would typically be that you'll go through, hypertrophy, which is normally the demonized word in the endurance community, the triathlon community in particular. And then you may go into a strength blocks or a hypertrophy strength block, and then a max strength block, and then a power block. But basically, power it's not related to your FTP. It's looking, I mean, there's different types of power. So you've got speed strength, and then you've got or strength speed, and you've got speed strength. So it's breaking that down further, but it's basically looking at your force output and the speed of your force output. But again, it's all relative to your goals. And I would lean more into a power block for a sprint distance triathlete than I would for an Ironman distance triathlete, because relative to that goal and that race distance, that sprint distance athlete is going to get a lot more return from their power phase than an Ironman triathlete. Doesn't mean that it's not relevant for an Ironman triathlete, because it certainly is, but the shorter distance going to get a lot more return from it. Just as we would on our triathlon training, we wouldn't program typically a sprint distance triathlete to go and do 4-hour ride or 6-hour ride at the weekend every week, because it would be like, hold on a minute, what am I doing this 3 weeks out from my key race? It's that, definitely.
And this is something I guess that I've often grappled with myself, is if we look at exercises that we know that we should be doing to prevent injury, we go, okay, well, we want to, I think building up somebody's posterior chain is probably the number one thing that triathletes can do to reduce injury. Posterior chain, for those out there who don't know, we're talking about the muscles that are generally that sort of on your back, as it were. So we're looking at your glutes, your bum muscles, your hamstrings, on the back of your thighs, and your calf muscles. All of that down there, they tend to get quite tight and quite underactive because we spend an awful lot of time sitting down, and they don't pull their weight, which is where I'm not going to say most injuries come from, but the lion's share of running injuries will come from people neglecting those. But we know we've got to work on our posterior chain. And we go, oh, well, if we want to avoid injury, we also need to be working on our on the muscles in our rotator cuff, in our shoulders, to be able to make sure that we're protecting them. And we also want to do a little bit of upper body strength, especially work on the back, for our swimming. Maybe a little bit of kind of overhead press for stability in the swim with our shoulders. And of course we want to do a little bit with our quads as well. And my physio gave me some exercises to look after my toes and my feet. Suddenly we've got this enormous list of exercises and muscle groups that we should be targeting. Oh, you got to do lunge patting, you got to do a hip patting, you got to do these isolation lifts. And I'm pretty sure you could go through every single muscle in the body and find a reason that triathletes should be looking after that muscle.
Yeah.
So how do you, I have an answer myself, but how do you as a coach kind of break down and realize, okay, what is the best use of the limited time? How many of these exercises can we hit? How often do we do them throughout the year? What are some movements that you would never consider dropping from a program? Or is there nothing that is sacred on a week-to-week basis?
I think first and foremost, that answer is always going to depend on the individual in front of me and how they move, their experience, their injury history, because there are definitely some exercises which could be deemed just as a bit of fluffy exercises that are bulking out the program, which they're the ones that can be cut because that's not actually relevant, or your athlete doesn't need that at the moment. The bigger focus is on their posterior chain or their hamstring capability and strength to support, their cycling, their running. particularly. So in terms of, the answer to that question is quite hard because it would really depend on who is in front of me. But I typically keep it simple with a squat, hinge, push, pull, press, rotary stability.
Yeah.
Following those formats, but not just lower body, but including the upper body or the core, so anything between the elbow, neck, and knees, to support the overall athletic development. If we look at the research studies out there, and there's I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head, but there's quite a famous one on marathon running, and it's talking about how you're breaking down, but actually that breakdown is coming top to bottom, because as you're fatiguing, it's actually then that your chest is, or your shoulders are hunching, your chest is collapsing forwards. That's then changing your torso oscillation, and then that's affecting your hip and your gait, running stride, and then obviously compound that for some people running 6-hour marathons. There's a lot of time to be compounding that singular repetitive movement. And obviously when you're running, you're taking, what is it, like on average 1.4 times body weight through in every stride.
Yes, I think that rings a bell. Yeah.
It's a lot to put your body through. And it's that bigger picture thinking of it. It's not just the legs, and it's everything else that comes into it as well, which I would say triathletes are more on board with because of the swim. I think the hesitancy so I work with a few duathletes, and it's sort of like, well, why do I need to do a lat pull down, or why do I need to do an overhead press? And it's sort of like, okay.
No.
But I think triathletes are definitely more on board with it because of the swim element.
Yeah. So if we are doing a good chunk, maybe all of our workouts from home, I would say, what can we achieve from home? I think we've already established that there's an awful lot you can achieve from home. What is it that somebody can't achieve from home? Is there anything of real import that you think, oh, this is a really critical part of the program that, I wish we could go to the gym to do, but we can't, so I guess we'll have to compromise. Is there anything that concerns you that you wouldn't be able to do, or do you think that sort of more or less everything with the right equipment and a little bit of ingenuity from yourself and the athlete, is there nothing you feel that you can't really do from home?
I think, as you said, with that creative element and the right equipment, then yes, you can do it from home. A big sticking point to me would be just the availability of weights for things like tendon health. So a lot of people think that, body weight or just holding a 10 kilogram dumbbell is enough on a single leg calf raise, or if you're going to then progress that into an isometric exercise, and I'm holding 10 kilograms in my left arm and I'm on my left ankles or raised heels off the ground. But actually tendons require a lot of force to strengthen and a lot of load there. I think it's 70% off the top of my head. It's a lot.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
It's a very high number. So obviously it's just then, if somebody has got persistent Achilles tendinopathy, for instance, and they're looking to really strengthen their tendon, then actually you've got to be honest with the athlete, haven't you? You've got to say that I can help you and I know what we need to do, but it might just be now that we just need to get you in the gym or look at what we can do in the home environment, because you can get cheap squat racks off of Facebook Marketplace. And, I think there was the boom in COVID where everyone decided to get a home gym, and most people are now selling them on. So I think I picked up a 20 kilogram standard 7-foot barbell for about 20 quid, which was really cheap. So you can be sort of clever with it, and then look at how you can then sort of have better access to equipment and weight choices. But that's probably the main sticking out one for me, would be around tendon health.
One of my clients, he's got a squat rack, which it swings out from the wall, so it sits neat against the wall, and both arms swing out 90 degrees, so that it becomes sort of a full squat rack that you can use and sort of rest the bar on for squats, which I think is a really handy little device, that, because having a big cage in your garage, it's going to take up a huge amount of space, and I'm sure there's a maximum weight limit on that squat rack there, but would a triathlete really be coming up against the upper limit of that weight limit? Probably not. I mean, I mean, okay, if you deadlift, then you're probably that's when obviously you're always going to have the most weight on the bar is when you're deadlifting. But if you've got any weight which is resting on the squat rack, so if you're squatting or you're lunging, not that many triathletes are going to be going north of 100 kilos
Yeah.
with any real regularity. Of course, some will. If someone got a really good gym background, if someone was an ex-rugby player and still has that muscle and that bulk, yeah, they might.
Mm.
But, not everybody does. However, when I think strength training really can end up in peril is when people travel internationally, or even when they travel within their own country. Um, what tips do you have for people when they're traveling abroad? Obviously, you can't stick a pair of dumbbells in your checked luggage. Well, you can, but I'm not sure it's necessarily the best use of your
Use of your
allowance.
yeah.
So when you have clients who are going away for a conference for a couple of weeks in Dubai, what do you recommend to them to keep things ticking over while they're away?
So have a look if they've got a hotel gym. Is a nice one. And then normally I'll get people to either send me the link to the website so I can see the equipment, or we might
Yep,
just email in and they will ping across, or they take a photo of it. And then
yep.
you normally TripAdvisor's got, here's the gym, haven't it? It's quite
Oh,
handy in that
that's a good
regard.
tip.
And then I'm like, okay, right. So I've got this. And again, it's for me, it's sort of a similar concept to the triathlete. He goes into the gym in the UK or their local gym where they do their swim sessions versus abroad. Is if you don't know what you're going to do when you're there, you're going to feel lost and you're going to feel,
Mm,
oh, I don't really want to be here. I'm out of my comfort zone. This is very
yeah.
different to my home gym environment, or this is very different to my gym that I'm used to using down the recreational centre. So I think
Hmm.
going in with a plan, keeping it simple, as we've been talking about, hopefully
Yeah.
by that point you've been consistent with your strength training. So you're now, you know how to squat, you know how to lunge, you know how to hinge, you know
Yeah.
what, if you're, say you struggle with a single leg deadlift for balance, then hold on to a fixed object to support you with that. In that movement, we're not looking, the main reason behind that exercise is for that single leg hinge pattern, when it's not balance exercise. So
Yes.
if you're going to suddenly be capped by your balance, then just hold on to a fixed object, a wall or a rig or something there that's not going to move. And that can be a really powerful way of doing it, especially if you're going to start to introduce load to that movement. If you
Hmm.
really didn't want, or there was no access to the hotel gym, or you
Yeah.
just didn't like that, then I would say something like a TRX would be really handy,
It's a good
because
shout.
you can manipulate a lot of body weight stuff and exercises with the TRX, and being savvy with it. Like I've got one here actually, just because we had a water shortage before Christmas, but the big sort of 5 litre water bottles. Is this 5 litres?
Yes.
Yes, they can be. That's a great goblet squat alternative.
Oh yeah.
And
Yeah.
obviously, if it's a bit heavy, just drip out a little bit of the
Take
water,
a bit of
put it
water
in
out.
a
Yeah.
cup, and you can sort
Yeah.
of manipulate it. But it's sort of just having that. I would say the biggest thing is having a plan and
Yep.
keeping moving, because even if we go right back to the roots, so before we even think about the weight, before we think about tempos, and we want to be thinking, can this person squat? What does that squat look like? And if then that means that you go for, you have this conversation with your coach, and rather than doing 20 bodyweight squats, because arguably we don't really want you doing 4 sets of 20 bodyweight squats if you're 2 months out from your key race, because it's a lot of
Mm.
volume there. But then could we do a 3-1-3 squat? So you take 3 seconds where you're slowly
Yep.
lowering down, you have a 1 second pause, and then rather than sort of bam exploding up, you come up
Hmm.
slowly for 3 seconds, and then you've got quite a lot of time under tension, but we're just going to do 6 to 8 reps of that, for instance, and you don't need
Yep.
any equipment whatsoever. And I'd say to your listeners, yeah, just try a squat rather than sort of exploding, pinging through it and rushing through it, which I think a lot of us can be guilty of. If you really focus on them, how you're moving rather than what you're moving, it can be very powerful. And it's nice to have that breakaway as well from the regular strength training that you do. It's
Yeah.
just like when you go and run somewhere, or you take your bike and you go to a different location, or you're lucky enough to go to a training camp in Mallorca, and it's like, oh, this
Yeah.
feels like heaven, because it's
Yes.
all new routes, it's exciting and it's different. And I guess for me, that's one of the selling points of strength and conditioning training, is that actually you get to do something which benefits your sports without you actually doing your sports. Because if we're all being honest, I know I've woken up many times in the past and been like, can't be bothered today, don't want to run today, don't want to ride
Yeah.
today. And that's not
Yep.
because I don't love the sports, I do, but I'm
Mm.
human, and there's definitely days that I'm like, not really up for it today. But then to have that confidence to be like, oh, I've got my strength session, and I might do that earlier on in the day because I don't want to run. It's like even last week for me, I did this. So I said earlier on that I normally do on a Friday, run morning, home workout, lunch or evening. But actually last week I woke up and it was so cold and it was frosty, because it was early, because I've got a call at sort of 9. And I was like, you know what? I'm just going to go in the gym or the home gym that I've got set up,
Yeah.
and I do that first, and I'll run later when it's a bit less frosty, the conditions are better. And it was
Yep.
great. And mentally, I was like, okay, I'm doing something which is helping me towards my goal.
Yeah.
Without me actually having to go through the mechanics of doing that at that time.
Yeah. It's also nice if you are unable to participate in a sport due to perhaps injury or equipment reasons, to be able to still do some development towards that without actually sort of being able to do sort of the sport itself. I think there's a lot of power in that. I know, just take it back a little bit. We talked about maybe sort of when traveling, sort of taking the TRX. Something that I think I underestimated the versatility of earlier in my coaching career. It's a good set of resistance bands. If you want to take something with you, if you're going away, if you're going to stay with the in-laws, if you are traveling to sort of hotels, if you're able to take with you a small selection of resistance bands which weigh absolutely nothing, take up no space, you can get through. Even if you just sort of wake up 20 minutes earlier than normal, there's an awful lot that you can do with them to top up that strength and mobility work while you don't have access to weights.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, a really good staple to put by your suitcase. Or I typically use resistance bands in the warm up, the mobility section of a strength session. That's typically where they feature. Obviously it depends on the athlete, and they might become more present later on if an athlete is struggling in a certain area. But I definitely think, yeah, they're a really great tool to, it's a bit, you're almost changing the shift in your thinking then of your strength training as strength, but also prehab or rehab work. I think for me,
Yeah.
that's a big, and I've spoken to sort of physios about this, in sports physios, in the sense that, you get a triathlete and they come to you and you give them a program and they follow it for 6 weeks religiously, and then
Yeah.
they just stop what they're doing because they're like, I'm completed my
Yes.
program,
Yeah.
my injuries it's not flared up anymore, it's settled down, I'm good to go. And then their training ramps up, they've stopped that prehab or rehab at the time work. And for me, there's a massive gap between rehab and then strength sessions. And I guess that's what we're trying to, those in the industry are trying to reduce that gap. So it's not just
Yes.
band work and then suddenly barbell back squat. It's all of the stuff that comes in
Yes.
between.
Yeah.
And I think that's, really important, that just because you've done it's like, you've done your physio, great, but what's next?
Yes.
Because now your training's back up to full volume, you're going to get that same injury again because you've stopped doing that rehab work, or
Quite
you're
likely.
still doing
Yeah.
that rehab work and you're now treating it as prehab work, but your volume's increasing, the intensity is potentially increasing, that demand, but you're now not strong enough to be able to handle that demand because you've gone from training 8 hours a week at relatively low volume to now you may be training 8 or 6 hours a week, but the intensity is a lot higher as we're approaching race day.
Yep.
Can your body handle that? Likely
Yep.
no, because you've not plugged that gap in between the prehab work and the now newly imposed demand of your triathlon training. So for me, there's that big gap, which, we're trying to slowly reduce, hopefully, day by day.
Yes. No. That it's a good point. I think Some people they think, oh, I'm going to stop my strength work now. And whether it's because they finished a rehab program or whether it gets to March and they
Mm.
go, oh, I'm going to cancel the gym membership. I'm just going to focus on swimming, cycling, and running now. I mean, can you imagine if a triathlete said, you know what, I'm happy with where my cycling is now. I'm going to stop my cycling now it's March. I mean, that would be insane. But again, people, and they would get laughed at. But kind of doing a hard stop on your strength training just because you reach a certain time of year, like the example that you gave at the start of somebody who just does sort of 3 to 4 months during the off season, you are going to start to lose the benefits that you gained. And again, sort of
Mm.
just try if you keep strength training little and often, consistently throughout the year, that is far more important than how much you can deadlift.
Oh, 100%. And a scary statistic on that is I think it's an Isherin, I may be pronouncing that wrong, but study showed that it takes roughly 30 days to lose strength and power adaptations. And
Hmm.
something that I think it's more of that upset again, but in the sense of, oh, if somebody's just gone and spent like hours in the gym over winter and
Yeah,
they're like feeling really good and they're really strong relative to their strength, and then they're
yeah,
just drop of a hat, March, weather's better, training volumes ramped up, don't want to be in the gym or don't want to be in my home
yep,
gym. That's gone now out the window. And then what you spent hours doing, your time, is
yeah.
waste. You've lost, okay, it's not a waste completely, but those
No, yes,
qualities that you were eliciting
yep.
are diminishing in as
And
little as 30 days.
we all will lose strength throughout a triathlon season due to the fact that we're moving away from that sort of that strength focus that we might have in the winter. And as we're doing races and we're doing little tapers into those races,
Mm.
when we're not lifting as heavy as often, there is going to be a small, I think it's unavoidable to have a small loss as we get closer to racing. um but yeah, if you have that just sort of fall off a cliff, you may feel great, better than ever as a result of the strength work. But yeah, if you don't keep that up, then the chances of you picking up a niggle before your race, like, really, really increase.
Yeah.
One thing I will admit to being a bit rubbish with, and this is just me as an individual, is the discipline of doing strength work at home. Now, I think this may well be because I don't have a dedicated sort of home gym space. Everything I do is in my living room, and sometimes I can be sat there on the sofa, tired. I look over at my resistance bands or my yoga mat. I got my dog curled up next to me. I think I just can't be bothered. But yet, if I were to go, right, I'm going to the gym this evening, I am much more likely to get strength workout in. Now, if I had a garage and I could make that up to be a home gym, and I could put on some gym clothing, get changed into gym clothing, and step into that gym space, I think that mindset for me would probably be a lot easier. Do you kind of have any experience with that as a coach to athletes, but also yourself personally?
I would agree with you, definitely, in the sense of you're associating that. I mean, it sounds easy, doesn't it? Oh, it's only half an hour twice a week. You've got the time for that. Everyone can find the time for that. But we've all guilty of being sat there. I know I am. And I'm like, not with the strength stuff, but definitely with other elements of my life. And I'm like, I know it's not going to take me long and I really should be doing this, but
Mm,
I can't really be bothered. So
yeah.
I think, as you said, having a different space, or I mean, you can create that ritual still in
Oh,
in
well,
the
yeah,
in
I
your
know I
living
could.
room of
Yeah.
changing your attire and then getting into the session. But I suppose it comes down to finding what works for you as
Mm,
an athlete. And for me, I like to block out the time. So personally, and for the athletes that I coach, for those who struggle a lot to get the strength sessions in, or the mentality towards the strength sessions, it's
mm,
sort of like, right, I'm not micromanaging you because you're an adult and your day's probably going to likely shift, but this is the day we're getting this done. This is the window we want to get this done. And
yep.
then it might be that being sensible. If you don't get it in on the Friday, then can we get it in on the Saturday and shift your training around? Obviously, that's dependent if I'm in control of the triathlon training or if they've got their own independent triathlon coach. I'm not going to tread on anyone's toes with that because I'm sure that's definitely another conversation. But it's just having that, and it comes down to how bad do you want it? It's priorities again. For me, all of strength training for triathletes is a priority game. And to be on board with that, you've got to be on board with that outcome. You've got to believe in that outcome. And if we go back to the injury side of things, which I think, as we mentioned, a lot more people are on board with strength training if they have come from an injury background, that actually, I think I said at the start, it almost feels like you're at the top of the mountain, and then you're going to reach a summit, which is your goal race, hopefully get the times or performance outcome that you want, but then you fall right back to the bottom. And I used to very much be in that mindset, but over the years of coaching and my own experience with it, and strength training is like you're climbing back up that mountain, but you're finding all these little shortcuts. So suddenly you can get back to the summit a lot quicker, a lot stronger, and a lot more information behind you. So, we can't generate more time in the week for people because unfortunately we don't have that power, but we can help you. Oh gosh, wouldn't it? But we can help you get on board with, right, I think sometimes it's just that, rather than here's a strength session, but it's like, here's a strength session today, we're going to be targeting on your hip musculature area, and I can see from the movement screening where you did this exercise, this is a key problem that we need to work on, because actually on the bike, what's happening, because you've sent me now a video of you on the turbo trainer, is you're rocking side to side like you're on a chair that's wobbling you, or trying to stay on one of those balls that are trying to buck you off. You're just wobbling, and then all that's happening is that pelvic instability. The power is now not going down into the pedals, it's just being lost trying to stabilize you on the saddle itself. So it's sort of everything I do, I suppose, always tries to come back to the triathlon, because that's what we're doing it for. It's like that I'm telling you this is important because this is what it's going to mean. And most, some people don't need that, and it's not like every day there's going to be or every session there's a breakdown of like, right, today we're doing this because of this, blah blah blah. But it's having that conversation, and it's like, I personally, if I know the why of something, then I'm going to be a hell of a lot more on board of doing something, because I understand it and I see it and I see that value there, rather than if I get told what to do.
I think sort of something we could all do better as coaches is explaining the why to athletes. Because I think it's easy for us to assume, perhaps sometimes, and maybe, not everyone sort of understands exactly why they're doing each exercise and how that relates. I mean, something that I try to do when I record exercises to show my athletes, go, this is what the exercise is called, this is how we do it, and this is how it applies to your triathlon performance. Because that is like, having all of that knowledge is going to make somebody feel empowered, and it's going to make them feel more confident when they go away. Go, great, I am doing this single leg Romanian deadlift because it's really important for me to engage my glutes and to get that sort of that action moving, get the muscle fibers talking there, and to sort of protect myself against injuries that come around the hip complex. But if you just tell somebody, do this, do this, do this, do this, then it can very much almost feel like some sort of like military punishment. Right, give me 10 push-ups.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that comes on board as well, right from the off of, I think sometimes the movement screenings are just eye-openers. People are really, really strong age groupers, sort of top, potentially in the world championships or the European championships. And then you say to them, okay, we're going to do some capacity tests. And I know there's wording around tests, and that's something I'm trying to look into a bit more, but we're just going to do these exercises. So a single leg hamstring bridge, and this is what we're looking for. How many? And at this point, they don't know the why behind it, but this is sort of the initial phase. And then they're like, okay, I managed 10 on my left leg and 8 on my right. And it's like, oh, okay. But you're training for an Ironman where you're going to be putting your body through 9, say for a competitive,
Yeah.
9 hours, but of somebody potentially up to the cutoff point, and you're telling me you can do 10 hamstring single leg bridges with no load, that's a huge gap. Or a pistol squat or sit to stand is another huge exercise, and it's sort of really eye-opening. Or single leg calf raises. How many times, I encourage your listeners, how many times can you do a single leg calf, or how many single leg calf raises can you do before you feel like your calves are on fire? Working to a 1 on 1 off tempo, 1 second up, 1 second down, for instance, or you can use a metronome or a watch or something there to help you with that. And that can be really eye-opening and really powerful stuff to then be like, oh yeah, we need, then there's an individual, I need to change. Something needs to happen, because I can now see where that gap is, and I'm going to push my triathlon training volume intensity as it comes, but I can only do 8 single leg hamstring bridges, for instance, or 10 calf raises, but I expect my body to ride 112 miles and then run a marathon afterwards.
Yeah. I think a lot of us have heard about the Ironman shuffle, which is how you can see, when you watch the tail end of an Ironman marathon, and people whose hips are dropping, they're leaning forwards because they're sort of their shoulders rounded and their core's collapsing, and if you look at why people fail to finish Ironmans, okay, there's going to be a lot of people who don't make it round the swim. Okay, there are going to be people, of course, who crash. I think a lot of people who fail to cross the finish line, it's very rare that, oh, I was just so out of breath, I just couldn't keep going. Most of the time, and this is maybe a little bit of a hot take, it's their musculoskeletal system letting them down.
Yeah.
Especially on the run.
Yeah.
It's people cramping up. It's people who get their calves suddenly go rock hard, and so they're having to almost hobble their way round the run course, and then guess what? Their other calf starts to or maybe their hamstring starts to go. And yes, people say, "Oh, Ironman is 90% mental." Well, yes, being stubborn does get you, it does help.
To ring the bell.
Yeah, but having a body that isn't going to let you down. Of course, we can never know for certain that our body isn't going to let us down. But putting in that strength work, finding the time to do that, to make sure that, as you say, that sort of biomechanically, the way they move is more symmetrical. They don't have those large asymmetries especially within the posterior chain. It could well be the difference between somebody, finishing really strong or walking the last 20, 30K of the marathon, because their body just isn't letting them run. And my theory, I think, from what I've read regarding cramps, people talk about salt and it can be affected by
Yes.
it not having enough salt. I'm not
An
dismissing
imbalance,
that,
yeah.
but I think, and I know there's nothing really definitive on this, but what I've been led to believe is that a lot of the time when a muscle cramps, it's simply because you're pushing it beyond what it has been trained to do. And there's no way that we can replicate an Ironman marathon in training. That would be insane
Yeah,
to ask
that's exactly
somebody
what I
to
was
do
just
that. It would
about
be
to say.
absolutely ridiculous. But
Yeah.
if we do get somebody to make sure we're doing a set of calf raises a week, that could really just protect us against that breakdown during the race itself.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you mentioned it earlier, and I know you mentioned it on other podcasts, that it's like in your insurance, isn't it? And as you said, it doesn't always pay out. We can't guarantee you it's going to 100% gold standard going to pay out. However, it is putting that insurance in place for you. And let's not beat around the bush. Ironman is expensive. The race entries are high. The kit, the equipment, hotels, if you're going to stay away, it's an expensive game. And then why would you sort of scrimp on your strength training?
Or hiring
To
a
me,
strength
seems a
coach
bit
or a
wild.
triathlon coach.
Yes,
Or
yeah.
I mean,
When you're
you
going to go and
can.
drop 2K on a disc wheel to get a few
Yes.
seconds, but then you might not be able to last the run because you haven't got that strength in your body there to support the demands of Ironman.
People like toys. I like toys, but it is about what's actually going to help you achieve achieve your goal. Now, last question, because we're running out of time a little bit,
Yep.
is regarding combining strength training with such as swimming. So if somebody has a membership to a gym that has a swimming pool and a gym, what are your thoughts about somebody doing a gym and a strength during one trip? And if you think that is a good idea, or at least not a terrible idea, which order would you recommend that people do that in?
So this is, I guess, the interference effect, which some of your listeners may know, or definitely the strength coaches out there will know as well. So you saved the good question for last, and I have to try and wrap it up quickly.
No,
But
it's all right. Don't feel you have to fit it within 30 seconds.
no, so I think it's a good way of doing it, for
Hmm.
especially if you are going to get more benefit out from the psychology of I can do it at home, but it never gets done. I don't want to do it at home, but being in
Mm.
the gym means I'm going to get it done.
Yeah.
But then it's being savvy with your swim sessions. So there are studies out there with regards to the interference effect, and typically it comes down to volume and it comes down to intensity. And the higher those two, then the more of the interference effect, because of the hormonal changes
Hmm.
that are going to take place. And then that's going to cause potentially a different stress response that's not going to allow you to build strength as well. So you'll
Yep.
technically be investing that time, but not getting the reward from that time that you could have had.
Yep.
For me, I always say gold standard is a 4 to 6 hour window between your sessions if you
Hmm.
can. So if you run in the morning, strength at lunch or in the evening, obviously depending on time you run in the morning, but I
Yep.
appreciate that isn't always possible. Then normally it comes down to so going back to the question, yes, I would and do program strength sessions are normally I was going to jump in then, depending on the athlete's priority. So
Yes.
are they really focusing on their swim, really focusing on getting a specific response from that swim training?
Yep.
Or is it sort of they're pretty competent in the swim, but they know they need to swim, they're getting it done, sort of.
Yes. Yep.
If we think about the swim sessions compared to the bike and the run, then typically they're lower intensity and less volume anyway. So that ticks that box, in my opinion.
Yep.
And then it's personal preference. If the athlete, if actually I don't want to do my strength session after I've swam because I don't want to be in the gym really wet, for instance, or I have to have a shower and then have a shower
Yeah.
again, and
Yeah.
that's not going to be
Yep.
great for my time. But I would then just look at their swim session that I've got prescribed for them, and we're not doing on that day 50-meter repeats in the pool, because that's going to
Yes.
potentially be
Yeah.
quite high intensity. But if it's a steady endurance swim,
Yep.
35 minutes, 40 minutes, something like that, then yeah, I see absolutely no reason why you can't go and do your strength session
Yep.
either before or after, depending on personal preference.
Yep.
And again, it all comes down to that. In your strength sessions, it's not that most people, when I program them, are surprised by how easy, in relative to, obviously easy is a complicated word in the endurance
Mm.
world.
Yes.
However, but how easy the sessions are, in the sense of, oh, I'm only doing 8 reps and then you want me to rest for 90 seconds. Yes.
Yep.
I mean, obviously you can be savvy with it and you can turn it into more of a circuit style for time purposes if you're targeting
Yes.
different muscle
Yep.
areas, something we've not touched upon. But it hasn't got to be that you do an exercise and then you just sit down playing on your phone for 90 seconds or 2 minutes.
Yep.
But it's yeah, so it's just thinking that nothing you're going to do in that gym is going to suddenly make you not be able to get your arm over your head and do a front crawl, because
Yep.
then we've overcooked the gym and the gym's not respecting that principle of that strength training is your triathlete, or your endurance enabler, or your triathlon enabler, whatever you want to call it in that regard.
Yep.
So yeah, I see no reason that and it's sort of making the most out of your swim membership as well, isn't it? If you've
Yeah.
got access to that gym,
Yeah.
use it. What are
Yeah.
your
If we do program a bunch of overhead press and bent over rows before
yeah
somebody's swim set, obviously that's a bad idea. But again, that just comes down to savvy programming or self-coaching, and just making sure that you don't do anything that's going to directly interfere with the session that you have later.
Yep. And interestingly, for somebody, I'll just jump in quickly. If somebody did do their swim first and their strength session afterwards, this study was for running and cycling, but I made a note of it that if you do a strength session directly followed by a low intensity run or ride, it can actually help with the aerobic adaptation. So you can help with your swim in this regard. Well, I'd have to research if there was a swim, but in this regard, it was for running and riding. So if you were a treadmill, because it was really frosty outside, you had a sort of a 30-minute steady run, and then you were like, right, I'm going to do my strength session. It can actually help with the aerobic adaptation from the strength session can help with the aerobic adaptation that you did 30 minutes on the treadmill of. So just another
another reason to do strength training. What a salesperson. Right, great. Thank you so much for your time, Emma. I hope that I'm sure people have learned a lot there, even those who know a lot about strength training. I know I've learned a couple of bits. So thank you very much for your time.
No, thank you very much for having me. I really appreciate it.
And I will drop a link to your socials and your website in the show notes so that people can track you down. So that sounds a bit more sinister than it probably should have done. So people can find if they want to. Yeah, if they want to get in touch, let's stick with that. All right,
no, nice brilliant. One. I appreciate it, Simon. Thank you. And yes, right. Great podcast. So
thank you very much. Really appreciate that. All right. Enjoy the rest of your day, Emma. Thank you.
Thank you. Cheers, Simon.
Cheers. I really hope you enjoyed that discussion. I learned an awful lot, and I hope you did too. A quick reminder that if you would like to support this podcast, you can do that by one of two ways. You can either submit a nice review to the platform where you consume your podcast from and make sure you subscribe so you don't miss an episode. And you can also have a look at our weekly swim sessions and education hub that I will give you for only £10 per month. All those details, along with information about Emma's businesses, are down in the comments. Well, thank you once again for your company, and I'll see you all next week.